Ceding Quiche Island to China or putting an end to the US triad's maneuvers against Iran? The US, Israel and Saudi Arabia, basically. The 25-year roadmap between Iran and China caused unrest with foes and stirred up alarm with fellow Iranians. With the US pulling out of the JCPOA or Iran nuclear deal, a long-term, all-inclusive energy and security deal with the upcoming ace in the East made it look like Iran was falling into the lap of China to become a client state. Us media have set out to set the record straight with extensive explanation, but politicians at neither end have seen the question fit to ponder on. Titled The Comprehensive Strategic Partnership between the Islamic Republic of Iran and People's Republic of China, the roadmap is still far from a deal, but it may pace the road fast in coming through. How has it stirred so much concern, and why is it worth the words and worry? Stay with me, Leila Faromarzi, on Iran Today for answers. China is an upcoming power, albeit an economic power. Not yet fully recognized, it has raised eyebrows. Many see its endeavors as taking advantage of weaker nations, mostly through the Belt and Road Initiative, an attempt at reviving the old Silk Road, which would give China access to Europe and the Black Sea by land, if Georgia granted it access to its Black Sea ports. It would enhance China's position not only in West Asia, but in Central Asia and the Caucasus. Every Iranian I spoke to sided with the government on this one, mind you. Mr. Vafai is Professor and Science Group Chair at Tehran University's China Department.
China
is trying to win a toehold in the Middle East. It has so far been out of the loop. For instance, on the Israeli-Palestinian issue, China has sought in recent years to become active. It recently named a Middle East special envoy. These are some of measures China is undertaking in this sector. China has been trying to improve its ties with Iran. It is also willing to be present in Iraq and Syria, not for war, but for reconstruction. Iran is one channel giving China access to the Middle East. Iran has connections in both Syria and Iraq, and China is benefiting from these privileges. Iran can introduce lucrative projects to the Chinese, who may not know the region quite well.
One Belt, One Road project, which they call it sometimes Silk Road. This can be from the land, comes to the Central Asia. Central Asia could go to the north, to the Russia, for the northern part of the Europeans, can goes to the middle and the southern part of the Europeans, can go through the Iran. Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Iran goes to the Europe.
Here's how it's really to look for this country. $400 billion is how much cash Iran would get out of it once signed and sealed as a deal. That would be $280 billion for its energy sector and $120 billion for manufacturing and transport infrastructure. Iran would have its infrastructure boosted in return for a discounted oil flow to China and preferential Chinese access to various sectors of the Iranian economy. 100 projects have been included in the deal to be, which defy US unilateral sanctions against Iran. But that is not to say those projects are in desperate defiance of the US. Hardly.
Any
country willing and able to come and operate these projects would be welcome. It could be China. The only country with which we have banned any interaction is Israel. We have never said we don't work with others. It is others who refuse to cooperate with us. If we have no economic ties with the United States following the 1979, it was the Americans who cut ties with us. Those who claim that Iran is being colonized by China can come, and we will offer to sign similar agreements with them.
This 25-year plan was agreed in 2016 and has only been inked as drafts since last summer. Apart from the time length of the deal, 25 is the only sum declared in the deal as well. All the rest is speculation. Iran would have its airports developed and would fetch itself high-speed railways and subways. China would also be developing free trade zones in Marku in the northwest of Iran, in Abadan, where the river Arvand route flows into the Persian Gulf, and on some southern islands such as Qish. Quiche is not even the best candidate for the development program, let alone letting it to China.
We would need $70 to $80 billion a year of investment in our economy. But the size of our economy and our domestic resources make it impossible. We don't have such money to invest in our economy. Therefore, we need to attract foreign investment. At least half the demand has to be supplied by foreign investors. That is why we have set up the Foreign Investment Attraction Organization within the Ministry of Economy and Finance. If we want to sign long-term agreements with any other country, we have to say that we have underground resources, low-cost, young and educated manpower. We cannot say, for example, we have adequate water and ask foreigners to do agriculture work here. We have transit roads. These are our advantages. We are located at a geographical position providing best connection between west and east and north and south across the globe.
This 25-year plan is a good one. Normally, there are criticisms of impulsive decisions made in the country, but in this case, where there has been planning, some have got miffed. We have to have a plan before any cooperation with another state. This plan covers many sectors like IT, 5G telecom, and artificial intelligence. China is skilled in these sectors, and you must know that even many states with no strategic alliance with China are cooperating with it in these sectors. We should not lose such potential.
Our interviewee makes a good point. If Iran is giving away Quiche or any part of its land, why is the US not there for a piece of the cake? Why is Foreign Secretary Pompeo objecting to the deal to be? After all, the US has never had a problem with its self-image of owner of West Asia.
We had 8 years imposed war, just for 2 kilometers. So how we can just give such a advantages to them? Could you believe that we do? They said no, but they said that the channels, the foreign channels, the VOA and the BBC or something, I said that they say.
The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Mousavi, now assigned ambassador to Azerbaijan, categorically dismissed the claims about a lease on Iranian islands in the Persian Gulf, a monopoly on the sale of oil at low prices, or deployment of armed forces. Chinese forces as an invading force in Iranian waters, that is. He said such claims were too ridiculous to even merit a denial. Apparently, the Chinese response was not so different.
If you look at the agreement, when you are talking about military cooperation is such a big common maneuver which they are doing with everybody. About the training, about some technologies. So they are not come to have the bases in Iran and to be presented here. They are not going to have anybody, any soldiers, any armies, any manpower, military manpower here to run a base. No, this is not such a... Just cooperation is such a way for training, upgrading your technology in military. I'm sure the both sides. And no presence of the Chinese.
Mr. Khoshru came to our studios to review reactions worldwide. How has this 25-year pact between Iran and China reflected on Western and Israeli media, Israeli, Saudi Arabian, antagonist media?
What is happening currently on social media stems from certain think tanks led by Western governments, particularly the United States. To spread rumors, they are using various psychological tactics across Iranian media. For instance, they have created various hashtags like "No to Iran sellout," Labeling is one of their serious techniques currently underway in an attempt to call into question the planned Iran-China treaty. They are spreading rumors about Iranian islands, Chinese military presence, and establishment of Chinese military bases. Priming is another tactic they are pushing ahead with.
I asked Mr. Khoshru to explain how he detected where social media rumors about the deal stemmed from.
Based on our monitoring of social media, we spotted the first analysis on the Iran-China cooperation plan in U.S. media. What the mainly U.S. media claim is reproduced in social media, particularly Twitter. Those who are active in cyberspace and social media include users affiliated with the Zionist regime and users affiliated with the Mujahideen Khalq organization, as they are supposed to institute wrong interpretations into public minds in Persian language. MKO agents based in Albania and benefiting from Western fundings are involved. The Zionist regime and Saudi Arabia are also cooperating by spending money and offering human resources.
Time for a short break. We'll be back in no time.
Hi, I'm Sharzad Manoucheri, and this is the news section of Iran Today. We'll be looking online for the latest update on Iran-China relations in the midst of U.S. sanctions and threats. In an article by Mehr News Agency, we see that U.S. fails to isolate Iran. Former representative of Iran to the United Nations said that Iran-China's cooperation is strategic and that the U.S. has failed to isolate Iran. Referring to the various dimensions of Iran-China 25-year cooperation roadmap, Gholam Ali Khoshru called the cooperation a turning point in the relations between the two countries, as well as a comprehensive development in their relation. He described the Iran-China 25-year cooperation plan as a roadmap for the two countries to use each other's existing capacities to strengthen and develop bilateral and regional cooperation. New York Times uncovers the story of when China met Iran, a growing partnership between America's main Middle East adversary and Asia's rising superpower bears careful watching in Washington. In recent years, as the United States has been bogged down in unrewarding conflicts in the Middle East, China has been quietly expanding its economic, diplomatic, and even military activities in the region. Beijing motives are straightforward but varied. It seeks to advance its interests, such as a pressing need for energy imports and for destinations for surplus capital and labor. China, which beside being rich and powerful, shares Iran's revisionist inclination to challenge the United States' role in the international order, seems to be a perfect match in economic collaboration with Iran. In another article by Mehr News, we witness foreign media aiming to sour Iran-China relations. Mahmoud Vaezi condemned the rumors over the Iran-China 25-year comprehensive joint cooperation plan, noting that foreign media has started to sour the relations of the two countries. Speaking in a meeting, Iranian President's Chief of Staff, Mahmoud Vaezi, underlined that the agreement is a usual one that is signed aiming for strengthening the relations between the two countries. Foreign media have initiated a flow to sour the relations between Iran and China, said Vaezi, adding that unfortunately, even some people in the country are looking for any opportunity to raise their names and comments through such issues. That's all for this segment. We'll see you next week.
The deal is comprehensive, even all-encompassing. But I still asked if there were yet any further grounds for China-Iran relations to cover. But what did we say was in the deal for China? China is supposed to receive preferential access to various sectors of the Iranian economy, we said, and a discounted influx of oil and energy resources, without monopoly, according to the Foreign Ministry. Once in force, the pact will act on more than the economy. It would include unprecedented collaborations in transport and logistics in Iran's southern ports and islands, and its defense and security sectors. Two ancient Asian cultures, two partners in the sectors of trade, economy, politics, culture and security with a similar outlook and many mutual, bilateral and multilateral interests will consider one another strategic partners. The document says in its opening sentence.
For instance, in China's Muslim-dominated Xinjiang, many prefer halal foodstuff. Turkey's ties with China are strained because of its support for separatist Muslim groups based in China. That gives Iran big potential, but Iran has done nothing. For instance, Persian carpet has a good market there. The market is big with 50 to 60 million consumers. We can export prayer beads and prayer rugs there.
Like I said, it was in 2016 that the two countries expressed determination for such extensive cooperation. As stipulated in Article 6 of the Communique during the Chinese president's visit to Tehran, the two ancient Asian nations explicitly expressed their political determination to promote and deepen relations strategically by devising a comprehensive 25-year roadmap as the basis for coherent and all-out expansion of the political and economic relations between Iran and China.
In my view, that's very good. Iran has reached the conclusion that China is a qualified state with which it can develop comprehensive ties. Our ties with some nations may be focused on a single aspect, like agriculture, culture, or energy. But with China, we have reached the conclusion that we can cooperate in academic, cultural, and IT and economic sectors. And regarding the strategic aspects, our ties with some countries may be periodic. But the Islamic Republic of Iran and the People's Republic of China eye long-term cooperation.
Interestingly, Iranian statesmen have been articulately aware of the importance of the Beijing-Tehran axis as a counterweight to the US-led global order since as early as 1995. Iran and China share a desire to engage in revisionist regional moves without wanting to start a large-scale war, to put an end to US imperialism and military supremacy in the Persian Gulf region. It is a valid question, however, whether this will not lead to a Chinese show of military might in the region.
The Chinese believe that they have to revenge any blow from the US. Of course, China is by no means seeking any confrontation and challenge with the US, because it would suffer losses too. China is sticking with its ping-pong policy. A case in point was when the US imposed sanctions on several Chinese officials and China reciprocated. In the Sino-US trade war, China responded to Trump's decisions. The latest example was the reciprocal closure of US and Chinese consulates in each other's territory.
Still far from a deal, the roadmap has been agreed by governments, but the government has been enlightening Parliament to its merits as it needs that parliamentarian seal of approval before it can call the agreement a deal. Another valid question is why now? Well, US sanctions haven't helped. In spite of the 80s 8-year war of the West on Iran in the name of Iraq, Iran still did look to the West for trade and development. But sanctions were ongoing, gripping and easing time and again. Eventually, Iran did come to terms with the signing of the JCPOA with the US, Western powers, as well as Russia and China. But again, how did that go? Yes, it was when the JCPOA became operational in 2016 that Iran and China came to their 25-year understanding. But it was just that, an idea and understanding. But when Trump's USA pulled out of the nuclear deal in 2018, illegally most would say, and reimposed and imposed crushing sanctions on Iran, the Iran-China understanding became a harsh reality to the US and allies. US pressure reached the crunch of the matter at an opportune time, when the Iran-China pact is ripe for the signing.
China is gradually growing into the world's top economic power. Naturally, other economic powers like the United States and the European Union would not be happy, and naturally China will face a global tirade. That was one aspect. The other aspect is that some Iranians living inside or outside of the country are opposed to the entire Islamic establishment. That is an undeniable fact. We have some opponents wielding effective propaganda tools. They have penetrated our public opinion through their TV channels. When domestic and foreign opposition close ranks, they would paint a fake image of Iran.
It's been an opportune time for the 25-year pact to pick up, not just economically, but politically. Come October, the arms embargo foreseen in the JCPOA comes to an end. And US President Trump, although no longer a party to the deal, wants to renew those sanctions against Iran, while at the same time pressing for negotiations with Iran. The deal with China answers the insult in kind. It works for China too, as that country is locked in a trade war with the US, waged by the US. Also, it has tired of being subject to the threat of secondary US sanctions for dealing with Iran.
The Chinese believe that after Obama, the US has decided to change its approach vis-à-vis China. Until recently, the US was pursuing the carrot-and-stick policy towards China. But now, the US is convinced that China is a strategic threat to its interests, and this issue has been reflected in official reports from US security bodies.
As far as the JCPOA goes, at least, the East has shown greater support for Iran. That Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action or Iran nuclear deal was signed between Iran and the 5 permanent UN Security Council members, the US, UK, France, China, Russia, plus Germany. That's the P5+1. The US pulled out and waged more sanctions. Western Europeans stayed in, but sunk out of trade deals with Iran as warranted by the JCPOA. And now, with the influx of Chinese companies into Iran, they will have lost the opportunity for a strong foothold in this 80+ million market.
یک بازار بسیار بزرگی رو که به هر حال از دیرباز روابط اقتصادی
They're losing gradually a big market, that is Iran. They hoped the JCPOA would help them recover the Iran consumer market. However, due to their dependence on the US, they have deprived themselves of JCPOA benefits.
Russia and China, on the other hand, held on to Iran and the deal with it. And the three got to hold their first ever joint military exercise in the Sea of Oman last December. It was to demonstrate their will to maintain peace and maritime security in the region, but was understandably interpreted as a signal of defiance against the US military in this area.
The Iran and China issue is not purely political. Our ties rely on the economic facts. The Iranian and Chinese economies complement each other. What we are offering in the world markets is mainly energy and raw materials. That is exactly what China is generally buying on the world's markets. We are a major buyer of commodity and technology in the world, and China is a major seller. Therefore, they are complementary. Were it only for political reasons, we would have to develop cooperation with Russia.
China, the one remaining official buyer of Iranian oil, strongly opposes unilateral sanctions by the US and their impact on the cooperation of countries. China defies the US also economically, together with Russia and Iran, as the three have attempted to replace the US dollar in their dealings, an act that inspired Pakistan and may have other regional states follow. Why wouldn't Iran, with its free-falling rial, want China as a potential shield against US sanctions and even motions at the UN Security Council? Both share grievances against the US and allies. Both want freedom and security in their own regions. China as guardian of the South Seas and Iran as protector of the Persian Gulf, as Russia expects to be recognized as heavyweight of Eastern Europe. An alliance between the three would not be palpable to the US nor to Israel, which envisaged a future in which it would be China's major Middle Eastern ally. Not everyone thinks China can fully pull through with Iran, however, given the position Iran has been put in a US-dominated world. All said, the bond between Iran and China has been unbreakable and has traditionally worked for both, for over 2,200 years, and maybe more.
Even 2,000 years ago, the name of ancient Persian empires are seen in Chinese texts. There are some Chinese communities who see themselves as Iranians. There's a Parsi village in China. Referring to Persia, the Iranians have influenced China religiously. Some Persian words are being used in China. We are both Eastern nations with no negative background.
That's it for today. Thanks for watching from the whole team. Do watch again at the same times next week and each week after, as you never know what's going to be on. And don't forget to leave your comments and topic requests. Bye for now.